Hey, folks. Thanks so much for joining us for this curricular analytics community discussion information session. My name's Brandon Smith, and I'll share a little bit more in just a moment about the team that facilitates this academy. But I want to encourage you to feel free to use the chat anytime during this conversation. And hopefully, after we run through a few of these things, maybe we can even invite folks to come off mute, share your screen if you like, or share your image, your camera if you like, and have a bit of a discussion because this is a fairly small group. As Katie mentioned, early August, some folks are even still on summer break. So we just want to make this useful to you and make sure that any of your questions are answered. So I'll go ahead and get started here. The Gardner Institute has been around for almost 26 years. And you can read all about our mission down below, but we are primarily interested, we're a nonprofit. Everyone who works here is really committed to this mission, focused on helping more students, earn a credential of value that leads to a meaningful career. So we're highly focused on student success, and this work is just one part of that. We do lots of different things, but curricular analytics we found can be a really powerful tool. Here comes Dr. Prather. Um, it's a really powerful tool for helping more students retain and move through programs of study on time. And again, we'll talk more about that. So the opportunity, why would someone be interested in curricular analytics? Um, if you have programs of study that have issues with retention, um, here comes Larry McDowell. Uh, if you have folks, or if you have programs of study with issues with retention, low graduation rates, extended time to graduation. So it takes more than the prescribed number of terms to graduate for a lot of your students, or you have students graduating with more than 120 credit hours. You may have programs of study that are ripe for curricular analytics. Curricular analytics is all about being able to visualize the pathways and the connections, prerequisite and co-requisite connections between courses within a program of study. And this has been something that's been, developed by our couple of our fellows, Shawi Abdullah and Greg Heileman. And there's quite a bit of literature out there. We'd be happy to share some if you're interested. But this was an article that was written in 2021 about our work, really looking at, are programs too complicated? And the answer is, for many students, yes. And the result are some of those lagging outcomes that we talked about, extended time to graduation, students choosing to leave a major because of different issues, or not retaining within programs, or simply not graduating, those low graduation rates. So what's the Academy about? Curricular analytics is really a tool. The Academy is a supportive group that helps your institutions make the most of that tool, um, and also use improvement science as a foundation for developing a theory of change, or usually more than one change within a program, and then having measures associated with that that are time bound and assignable so that you can track that change over time. And so that's why this academy is initially 7 meetings, but it actually extends with a networked improvement community where we meet about every 4 to 6 weeks after that, within the cohort, to track how things are going. How are your change ideas panning out? And so there's an opportunity for shared learning. Because of the improvement science work, we have some shared frameworks so that we can very quickly look across all the institutions involved and see how people are addressing very specific problems of practice. And I'll just share now that it's not always about changing the structure of curriculum. In fact, more often than not, there are other systems at your institution that need to be accounted for, related to student success, related to pedagogy and practice in very specific courses, related to advising. And so all of that tends to come out during the qualitative conversations and as we start to gather evidence related to those maps. Um, in addition to the 7 synchronous meetings and the community, the networked improvement community, we also offer one-on-one. So there are three folks. It's Dr. Steph Foote, Dr. Rob Rodier, and me, Dr. Smith. And we're all available throughout the year for one-on-one technical support for you and your teams to ensure that you all are moving through this at the time that makes the most sense and that meets your institutional goals. So you can always, schedule sessions with us outside of those standard meetings. And then again, you'll have access to our platform for the whole year. And if you want to extend access to that, you can. And I'll jump in there in just a minute and kind of walk you through how that tool can help you with curricular analytics. So I'm going to pause and take a breath because I see there are a couple of things in the chat. Great. It's mostly from Katie. Perfect, perfect. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And then again, we'll unmute at the end and we can circle back around to any questions you've got. So as we mentioned, when we think about getting ready, we have these orientation meetings before this even starts. But what we hope folks will do is upload program data. It takes about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, for anyone with access to a catalog to upload a program. So this doesn't require a bunch of institutional data on the front end to build visualizations. All you need is a course catalog, or even better, some advising resources so folks know which term courses occur. And you can build one of these maps very quickly. We even have sometimes student workers do it. So this is something that's got a pretty easy way to access and start to build into this. Additionally, once we've got those built, we do some problem identification. So we do that using the 5 Whys protocol. We also have some multi-page inquiry guides to ensure that your teams are considering all the different systems associated with these courses. We then map that, so we visualize both the program of study, but we also visualize the challenges. We build driver diagrams, and then that plan, do, study, act cycle is sort of the last phase, and that's your action plan along with those measures. So essentially, at the end of that 7 meeting cycle, in an ideal world, your institution is ready to present both the problems they've identified, what they've learned, and what they plan to do about it in a time-bound way. So that's the 7-week approach in a nutshell. Um, Curricular analytics. This is the foundation. This is the bedrock, and I'm going to change my screen in just a minute and actually show you these because the picture you see on the right-hand side there, that's just a static image. What you actually get is a workspace when you build one of these. This is a dynamic workspace that you can actually interact with, change, do what-if scenarios. It's really a powerful tool. And the reason we think it's so powerful is in part because curricula are rarely visualized in this way, with these connections, which are these bottleneck courses are really inhibiting student progress in certain programs. And so we want to understand why that is, because if we can visualize this, then we can analyze it, and then in an ideal world, optimize it, or at least address some of the problems associated with it. So that's the importance of this tool. And then like I've said with the improvement science, the idea here is that we embrace the complexity because we recognize that the output, such as like student success in an algebra or a calculus class, that is actually when a student earns a passing grade, that is the culmination of many, many, many different variables, many different little causes that help that student succeed. And what this process invites you to do is think through how you can help that be clearer for students and transparent for them, and how your systems can be both navigable and supportive at the same time so that you have more students moving through those highly complex courses. So I'm going to change my screen share here for just a second. Exit full screen. I'm going to switch over to our platform to actually walk you through the component parts of the curricular analytics piece. So hopefully you all are seeing our platform and its full screen here. So when you log into the platform, this is just a sample. Um, what you will get is essentially these curriculum maps, and we can help you build these, but like I said, they take about an hour to build. And as you build maps, I'm going to pick one that's a little less complex than this one visually. That's too complex. Let's do the bio. There we go. So there are four quantitative measures of curricular complexity, and it's easier to show it in this map than it is to just talk about it. So I'm just going to pick this first math class, right? Differential calculus. I'm going to click on it. And you're going to see three of the four measures here. So I'm going to zoom in. So I've locked that course in place just for now so we can see it. So 9 is the complexity and 5 is the blocking factor. Blocking factors, how many courses are inaccessible to students if they can't pass this class, right? In this case, it's 5. The next question is, when we look at the longest chain, right, the longest of these chain connections, prerequisite connections, um, within the major, how many terms are taken up? And in this case, it's 4. So there are 5 classes across 4 terms, which gives us a complexity of 9. Um, this is really critical because a lot of folks just think about the next course in sequence when we think about courses. But in fact, if a student is not passing differential calculus in this course, they're not accessing any of these courses. And this is how we get that delayed time to graduation, or students who may find themselves choosing to major in something else because they're not actually making progress within the major after a term or two. The other measure of curricular complexity, let's see if we can get one here. I'm going to go to a slightly different map. Let's go to this one. Actually, I'm going to get you one other. Here we go, ISU. So here you're going to see a centrality number. While these numbers, the complexity and the blocking factor, are related to those prerequisites, the centrality is looking at both roads in, and so it's adding up these complexity factors, but it's across multiple courses, but it's looking at roads in and roads out. And when you have a highly central course, what it really means is that when students pass this course, they actually have access to lots of other coursework, right? And so a lot of times when you have a really highly central course, it's one of those courses that happens in the second or third year, and very frequently uh, means that if a student passes this course, they're very likely to finish the major. And so it's really important for us to look at those and look at how student success in these courses, how many students are making it there, and even what kind of support structures do we have in those courses? Because frequently what we find is we have lots of support for first and second year courses and less support in some of those upper level courses. A couple other things to show you here. You'll always get the number of credit hours in a program. You'll get the overall complexity, which I'll say this once and I'll say it again. It's neither good nor bad, but your overall complexity can be baselined against your current student success outcomes like pass rates, graduation rates, time to graduation. And what both the literature and our experimentation has found is that as we address curricular complexity, either by reducing complexity or adding in different student support or looking at pedagogy and practice in some of these highly complex courses, that baseline improves. So if we're able to reduce complexity or address complexity, we see correlated improvement. The other things worth showing you very quickly are things like this complexity by term. That's here. And so as you see, very frequently complexity is front-loaded. And again, this high complexity correlates with retention issues. And so there are lots of different strategies we can think about adopting to address the complexity that exists in these semesters and try to ensure that that we have more students progressing. Other things worth showing you is that as you make different variations on this, as you start to test things and say, well, what would happen if we moved this course over here, or we combined learning outcomes here, that you can have versions that you can rename as you go through. And as you build those versions, you'll always create a copy, and you can say this edit curriculum piece. And this is where you can get in and actually move courses around, or um, add a prereq, or remove a course altogether. And as you do that, you'll start to see some of these metrics changing, and your team can actually think through, well, what might it look like to make some of these changes? So again, it's a really dynamic workspace, and the engagement those 7 weeks of meetings are really designed to walk you through how to get the most out of these tool sets and build that plan of action. So before I go on, I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions. Okay, no problem. You don't have to speak now or forever hold your peace. It's worth sharing that the traditional use case is at the program of study level, right? So it's saying theater majors, biology majors, nursing majors, and analyzing curricular complexity. However, the Gardner Institute has two other variations that you'll have access to testing at your institution. One is this gateway factor. So, so traditionally, it's one program of study. With the gateway factor, you're mapping a single course across multiple programs of study. And this is a really powerful tool for trying to understand how a single course, like a calculus, like an introductory biology course, can have real primacy across lots of different majors for lots of different students. And it can bring faculty together who might be from different programs or not traditionally get together to analyze these different pathways that are specific to their majors and understand how learning scaffolds, um, think about some opportunities for change, and really even just some schools it's mind-blowing when we see, okay, this course blocks 231 courses at the institution. What does that mean for our students? Even when we look and see this the next term in sequence, how many courses in that second term are being blocked? So it's a really powerful, fairly new use case for curricular analytics. And then the last version that we do is related to transfer, and it's basically trying to show you how complexity moves for transfer students. So if you have the either articulation agreements or even courses that traditionally students are bringing in within a major, then we can start to map the differences for your team to analyze between transfer and non-transfer students. Um, these are just a couple of examples. And truly a couple. We have had many, many, many institutions go through this, but we like to at least bring up a variety of ways that this has been applied at institutions, in part because a lot of the literature out there is just STEM, right? It's just focused on engineering, on biology, on math, on computer science, and this tool can be used for any program of study, regardless of the size of the institution. So one institution, a regional comprehensive, they went through their 2D and 3D art programs, and they really, really changed the whole major, because they realized they had a bunch of legacy prereqs, that there were courses that essentially didn't need to be prereqs anymore. They realized they had duplication of courses in the third and fourth year. And so they went through this process and pushed through to their Board of Regents a redesign of these two programs, and did it in fairly short order. I think maybe 3 months total. So really impressive work there. And we're happy to put you in touch with some institutions who've done great work if you want to talk to somebody. Engineering program, this example, we had some low completion rates, low persistence rates, but especially for historically resilient communities. And they went through and they said, well, okay, we need to redesign our advising tools, so that students know about curricular complexities, so they understand how learning is connected. We need to change some of the measures of student readiness for our coursework to ensure that we're actually offering the supports our students need and not just what we think they need. And then additionally, they actually developed some new coursework to minimize unneeded travel because they had students going across multiple campuses to complete the degree, sometimes in the same day. The biology example is another great one. Um, they had extended time to graduation, and they were also having retention concerns in that second year. And so they went through, and one of the first things they realized when they brought advisors, first year advisors, and the faculty together was that there was some discontinuity between what was being said in those two groups. And so they actually fixed some handouts, fixed some resources so that the course sequencing was correct and what the faculty thought was best. They also went through, and as they were making learning within one bio program, they were like, that applies to these other four. So they went through and did that. They removed some unnecessary prereqs and actually combined some courses, um, and then went through and changed the way they were addressing student support within the major. And then this last example, and we have a couple of institutions that have done this, was really looking at what happens if we do this campus wide. If we make this kind of analysis standard for all majors on a recurring basis, at this school it was every 5 years, so that we can make better decisions about what to offer, how, and for whom. And so that's been done. It's also been used to combine programs of study at a couple of institutions when there were some issues with enrollment, some other things. But these are just a couple of the use cases. And what's really interesting and kind of cool about this is that every year, our institutional partners are finding either really innovative ways to address curricular complexity, or in some cases, completely new use cases, um, even related to things like mapping prior learning and adding in little micro credential pathways. We've got a couple of people who are testing those kinds of things, so it's pretty neat. So again, just to recap,
Hey, Brandon,
yeah.
there's a question in the chat.
Oh, yeah, let's go for it.
Candace asked, for these examples, did they have improved retention and completion rates?
It's been enough time for some of them. They did. I'll have to check with Steph because she's working on some write-ups on this, but there's a site that's going to map the outcomes related to that. I can tell you that the examples those are a little older, but some of our more recent examples, absolutely. I know for a fact because they're still engaged with us as part of our transformation work that they're seeing improvement in completion and retention in some of these programs of study because again, in many cases, these are very student focused and just term to term. But Steph has some case studies that I know she's been working on a site, and we can check in with her and see if that's ready to share.
And we can share that site, I think, in the email, if not the email that we'll use to follow up in the next week or so. We'll make sure that you all get them.
Perfect. Any other questions? I know I'm droning on. I'm normally joined by two other folks, but they're not in the office today, so apologies. Had things come up. So related to the process, just recapping those three use cases because it's not just about a program of study. You can look at individual programs of study, and that's how we start the work, just to familiarize you with the tool set and the methodology. But you can also look at transfer student success rates, and this is a pretty powerful piece because we know transfer students aren't always served well at our institutions. So that's a really powerful piece, and then also that gateway course piece, which is newer. Thank you, Candace. So this always comes up. We always have the question, who should be doing this? Traditionally, the CAC, Curricular Analytics Community, um, that 7 week period, we say you should probably be sending some faculty who are close to these programs of study. So folks from academic affairs, maybe at some institutions that includes folks from admissions, especially if there's that bridge between admissions and any kind of first year advising, um, you know, sometimes to bust some myths. Um, we also encourage you to bring IR staff, especially if you want to add to the story with things like student pass rates or retention rates, so that they know on the front end what your team might be asking for, because that can be a really powerful add-on to this. And again, if you're doing transformation work with us, you'll already have done a data upload and you can look at some of those outcomes. But if you're not, um, I'd love to set a meeting to talk through, and we've got some resources to talk through in the Getting Started site that can help your team make the most of this when they look at things like rates of Ds, failures, withdrawals, and incompletes on these highly complex courses. Faculty leaders, so folks who have a willingness to do this work. If you've got any retention specialists, reaccreditation teams, student affairs and support teams from across the institution, and sometimes even students, because again, at some of our institutions, when they can show some of this to students and ask them for their opinions on what it's like to live through some of this complexity, it can really change perspectives. So those are just a few folks, but traditionally, it's between 5 and 7 faculty and staff who are closely associated with these programs, and they become trainers, experts in this work, who then share that with other folks at your institution. But But we'd be happy to talk with you about who you might want to send and how that group might be designed to get you the most for the time. So I'm going to pass the mic to Katie so she can talk a little bit about how you can get engaged in this work, and then hopefully we'll have a little discussion.
Thanks, Brandon. So, of course, everybody wants to know how do we get involved in the work? And we have an application process. And I always like to say it is not about applying and us judging whether you're fit for the community or not. It's really to make sure that your expected outcomes match with what's going to happen during the curricular analytics community. We have a list here of the synchronous meeting dates. I will say all of those are recorded, and so they're available to you asynchronously if you can't attend synchronously. Usually there's somebody from the team who can come to the synchronous meeting, and sometimes there are people who can't. The fees are based on your undergraduate enrollment, and we use College Navigator to assess that. So whatever it says in College Navigator, we associate it with this list, and those fees can always be split into two payments or two fiscal years if that's helpful for you. And you complete the application, 4 questions, right, Brandon? I think.
Yes, it is very
Okay,
short.
put you on the list, but it's 4 questions, so it's very short. It's easy to complete. Once you've completed the application, you will get an agreement from Angie Whiteside, who handles all things financial for the Gardner Institute, and then you'll get a welcome letter from Brandon, our staff, and we'll get you started and get you ready for that first meeting on September 15th.
Perfect. And Katie, I appreciate that you mentioned that all of those are recorded. In addition to that, like I said at the beginning, we're happy to meet between meetings. I think with some of our highest success stories or our highest participant success, they've set those meetings, right? They set those in between meetings and they plan for work between these meeting sessions with their teams. And so, again, that's just something to think about, depending on how quickly you want to move through this. But just know that we'll be happy to meet with you all anytime. I'm going to turn the mic back over to Katie to share a little bit more about some of the other things we did. I alluded to the transformation work, um, but Katie can share more.
Thanks, Brandon. So we have a large, as you can see here, list of different types of ways we work with institutions, and they're not even all listed here if I'm looking, but we have our Transforming the Foundational Post-Secondary Experience, which is our biggest sort of lift in terms of both time and financial resources. And it's a 5-year process. And that's for those institutions who are really thinking about, we have so many different things that we want to work on. How do we sort of coordinate all of that so that we're not burning out our faculty and staff? And so that's really the Transforming the Foundational Post-Secondary Experience, and it gives you access to all the things listed here. So it starts with a sense-making process. I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but we come to your campus for 2 days and we help you understand your strategic priorities for student success. And then we map out for the next 4.5 years or so what you're going to do and how you're going to start seeing those improvements in student success. So those are listed here. If you have any questions about any of those, I just encourage you can reach out to info@gardnerinstitute.org. That comes to me, and I will make sure if I can't answer your questions, I can put you in touch with somebody who can. And we also like to mention our in-person events. So in the next 6 months, we're having 3 in-person events. 2 of them are happening in Chicago in late October, early November. They're back to back. The Graduate Student Experience is a student success conference for people who work in and with graduate students. And then the Symposium on Transforming the Post-Secondary Experience is our sort of annual conference. And it is part workshop, part concurrent session. So you'll spend about half your time in depth in a workshop with Gardner Institute staff, really thinking about how do you make transformational change at your institution. And we have 7 different areas in which you can focus on: first year, curricular analytics is one of those. So it's a great way if you're not ready to fully commit to the whole process to bring a few people and come and get your toes wet and really see what it is. And then the concurrent sessions are also sort of, you can go to any of them, but they are all tied to those 7 different tracks. So you can see what people are doing at other institutions along curricular analytics or first year or transfer, and so on. There's more. And the last thing we're doing is a 2-day workshop on transforming the transfer experience here in Asheville, North Carolina, where our offices are located just outside of Asheville. And it's a great way for your transfer team to sort of come together and really think about how do you transform transfer in a way that is beneficial to all your students.
All right. So we've talked a lot in the last 30 minutes. And what we're hoping is that some of you will feel free to raise a hand. We'd be happy to help you unmute, come on camera, and happy to go back into the platform, discuss some of the ways that curricular analytics has been applied at the Gardner Institute over the last few years. You know, we've been working on this for, I think, this about 5 years, almost, yeah, 5 years. And so during that time, a lot of institutions have gone through this work, and you know, some of them are who started with us back then are still using the process at their institution.
And I just want to add, because Brandon won't brag on himself, but his team is really doing some of the most innovative work here at the Institute. I got to sit in on a meeting, was it last week, the week before, at our organizational development days, where they were talking about that gateway course factor, and the capabilities that they're figuring out to use this tool are really, really amazing. So getting involved is really getting involved in some of the highest level of innovation happening in higher ed. So you will work with really a great team doing
It
great
is a
work.
great team, yeah. And I know Steph and Rob wish they could be here with you all, and hopefully, either at the symposium or during the curricular analytics community or both. You'll get to meet them because they are truly inspiring folks. Any questions? Folks who want to see stuff in the platform, talk about curricular analytics, ask questions.
So Brandon, I'm going to ask a question if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it, Katie.
One of the things that I always hear when I come to these meetings is that sometimes it takes a long time to make changes in higher ed. How does the curricular analytics community or process, how does it fit into that? Is it a long time to make changes or quick?
Katie, that's a great question. Thank you. I would posit that it can be very flexible to an institution's needs. So if you've got a timeline and you want to move quickly, um, the biggest constraint is actually the time for bringing a team together. So if you can set aside about 6 hours outside of those sessions with your team, you can get this work done very quickly. Um, so it can move very quickly. And when I say get this work done, move to an action plan. Depending on how many changes your institution decides to make, that can then take longer. But moving to an action plan with measures so that you're not just waiting to see if students retain, but you're saying, we're going to make this change and we're going to check early and often to see if students are actually moving toward the desired outcome, then move pretty quickly. Thanks, Katie. So folks should be able to unmute or come on camera. But so I don't know if that helps, Katie, but I would say it's flexible. We have some institutions spend the whole year working on this, and we have some, like I said, who get it done in 3 months. And then typically when that happens is they're so happy they add a program, add a program, add a program. And that's the other piece of this is that you can work on as many programs as you like. There's not a limit. So unlike some of our work where we say, you can only do 2 or 3, we recommend you start with 2 or 3, but you can work through as many programs of study as you'd like during the school year, and you can even add a gateway course or transfer, and yeah, so it's up to you. The world is your oyster.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, Katie. Oh,
Maybe now's a good time to stop recording And then if anybody wants to come on
Yeah.
camera and ask any questions, they can without being recorded.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. And Candace, I don't know if you want to voice over this. I'm going to pull up the gateway mapping and we can kind of talk through some of that.
Hi, you had mentioned there's a part of it, I think it was after the gateway mapping that talks about scaffolding the learning, and I'm wondering what kind of mapping is involved in that. Is that going at a course level, learning outcomes? What are we doing here?
So we typically invite the institution to use the maps as a foundation to then talk through how learning scaffolds using our inquiry guide. So I can kind of talk you through that because most folks it's trying to either understand how learn it's typically learning outcomes. It's typically saying these are the learning outcomes from the course, and that's why that's why it precedes this other course. But sometimes what we find is that um, some of that's hidden curriculum. And so we start to look through it and folks either say, well, students who are successful in that class just tend to be successful in the next class. And that's an opportunity we think to be really transparent about that for students and say, these are the things that you're going to get out. And so maybe that means changing some learning outcomes. Maybe it means um, even talking with, say, your support staff and saying, this assignment is really crucial for our nursing majors. And so we're going to say that in class, but we also want you to understand the assignment so that if they come in for assistance, that you understand, what the learning is, how it's going to be applied in context, those kinds of things. So um, that's all part of this. And some of our institutions make different grids and they have different conversations about that. I'm going to just pull up one of the gateway maps just to kind of give you an example here. There we go. And this one's not too complex, although you can see it's fairly complex. But honestly, this is not even close to the most complex. So this is an intermediate algebra course, right, that precedes algebra. And again, it blocks 59 courses. And so this is a chance where you can go to these terminal nodes, Candace and everyone else, and we can start to say, okay, if we're mapping backwards, what are the learning outcomes in 252 and how does it connect here? And then what are the Calculus 1 learning outcomes and how are we explaining those to students? What is the support for those different assignments or those different very specific learning outcomes? And so this can be a really powerful way to go through. And even again, because you can make these changes, sometimes folks just go in under edit curriculum and in this annotation space, they start to make those kinds of notes. So they say, this critical learning outcome relates to this course. And so there are a couple different ways we've done it in Excel spreadsheets as well. But again, having the visual gives us something to go back to that's a little bit more concrete and a little easier for folks to visualize because again, um, like for this social work major, what is it exactly in intermediate algebra that's blocking, say, this third course in sequence or this fourth course in sequence? So trying to think through those kinds of things just to be sure that we're not artificially filtering students um, is really critical when we think about trying to help more students move to graduation. I hope that helps. And if you've got more questions, I'm happy to jump through because I know we joke that we call these spaghetti and meatball maps because when you first look at them, they kind of resemble that. And the more time you spend with them, the more quickly you start to move through them and learn from them.
Gotcha. So no, thank you for that. So just so I understand clearly, so the product here, the tool is really this general mapping and seeing those interactions, but you're not necessarily you're not visualizing those outcomes in here. This is a conversation starter for you to kind of do that at a more granular level outside of this.
That's right. And
Okay.
we've got a series. So if for example, if learning outcomes was one of the things that came up when you all were doing your problem identification, as you look at like say the complexity chain in social work, or yeah, social work, and you said, you know, there's a lot of complexity here, and I'm not sure we know what the learning outcomes are. We don't make that clear for our students. Then that pushes you into another tool where we say, okay, well, let's talk through that. We've got an inquiry guide that can help your faculty do that and either map that in an existing tool if your institution has it, or build that out in an Excel document. Or like I said, even create a copy of this and start to add notes here in the annotation field where they make notes on those kinds of things, all trying to move towards a set of action items that can be made time bound in that plan, do, study, act cycle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great question.